Hey everyone, welcome to the 5th edition of Shootin' Straight, hopefully without any interruptions. But I wanted to come on here and talk about reboots and remakes, and honestly how it follows that old saying in Forrest Gump that Tom Hanks' character says, and that is, it's like a box of chocolates, you never know what you're going to get, which basically signifies you don't know if you're going to get a good piece or a bad piece. Pretty much, that's what I feel like it's telling me. And when it comes to remakes and reboots, there's plenty of examples, especially in recent years, of that being the case. For example, Netflix has dabbled in the Masters Universe franchise for a while. And one of the first examples of a remake potentially being good, but then turning stale, turning bad and all that, because of fan reaction and everything. And even those within the company that backed it, seeing pretty much what a lot of people are pointing out, is She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. And, at first it seemed like, okay, this is going to be great, a new She-Ra show, it's going to have elements to the original, it might be identical and everything, but instead it turned out to be something completely different. Yes, there were times, if not in one episode, they tried to pay homage to the original, but that was through a role-playing game that the characters were doing. But besides that, everything else was like completely different. It was completely different. And what really turned off a lot of fans later on about it, even though, it was still very popular to the point that it lasted for about 5 seasons, in which in actuality to me was probably like 2.5 seasons maybe, almost 2.5 seasons, like 26 episodes each and 13 episodes or something like that. I'm not really sure. I have to go look at the list. But what turned off a lot of people about it later on was the fact that, it was a She-Ra that was more about, oh, what are we going to wear to the prom? Oh, what are we going to bring for our sleepover? Oh, I ever thought of having a girls' night and everything? It's like, what She-Ra is this? What interpretation, what universe, I should say, does this She-Ra exist, if you know what I'm saying? And for a while, a lot of people that was critical about the series, like Clownfish TV and Geeky Sparkles of Clownfish TV and of Pirates and Princesses and many others, for a while they were pinpointing out what they believed was the reasoning behind the series being presented the way it was. It wasn't because of the fact that it's an alternate universe and everything, and this is an alternate She-Ra and all that. No. It was because, from what they could tell, looking at the background of the person behind it, that being Noelle Stevenson, they could tell that this, from their own opinion, and especially, for those like Clownfish TV, Geeky, and Neon, being in the animation business themselves, along with others that have also been critical about it, they could tell that this was Noelle Stevenson's own OC fanfic disguised as a She-Ra remake. That's how they viewed it. Because, again, what interpretation of She-Ra would actually act like this? What interpretation of She-Ra would actually act like this? And also, what version of any of the She-Ra related characters are teenagers? Because that's how they were presented, as 18-year-old teenagers, while the original She-Ra was presented more like somebody in her mid-20s to early 30s that had a maturing and understanding of what needed to be done. It's like, to them, it's like, what version of She-Ra in what universe, had characters like this and all that. It didn't make sense to them, even though they tried to give it a chance and even watch it to the end. They started seeing, that being a lot of other folks that supported it at first, but then kind of tapered off a little bit, or started to not really be invested that much. They started to see exactly what a lot of people were talking about. They started to see the similarity to what they were seeing on television, to some of Stevenson's past works in animation and in books and all that. And they probably were asking the same questions, like, why would you do this? Why would you use this established IP if you just wanted to tell an original story? Couldn't you have just gone to Netflix and say, hey, I got this great idea for story and everything. I'd like to turn it into an animated series. What do you guys think? You know, and maybe Netflix, maybe that's what she did, and Netflix turned it down, and she figured out, okay, what else could I do to get the story off the ground? And that's maybe when she decided, hey, what if I make it She-Ra remake? And that's pretty much the end of it. But again, this is a straight shoot with you, shooting straight. It's just a prime example of something that positively looked like it was going to turn out to be good and tasty, but in the end turned out to be bitter and bleh, not so tasty. But if you were to compare it to Master Universe Revelation, which was, promoted as a spiritual successor continuation of the original Filmation series, people would say Princesses of Power was a vast improvement, was vastly better, and an improvement over what we got with Revelation. Because here's the thing, even though a lot of people were excited that Revelation was coming, Kevin Smith was behind it and all that, because he supposedly understood how the fans felt and knew what the fans wanted, that wasn't the case, because during production and everything, information started to come out, leaked out, I should say, started to be leaked out by those within the inner circle, I guess you could say, or those within the know, of the project, that it was not totally going to be a He-Man, centric show. That instead it was going to focus on Teela. Now, yes, the promotions did say it was going to be, Teela was going to be a focal point, a main focal point, but they made it sound like, okay, Adam's going to be by her side when they do this and all that, that's fine. But the more information that came out later on from those within the project, the more we started to realize that not only was Adam not going to be involved, but it was going to be mostly the Teela show, and that it was going to be a Teela that nobody was going to like. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. But what made people even more pissed off about this was that Kevin Smith and his inner circle of buddies tried to deny that. They tried to say, oh, no, they're telling you a lie. I'm telling you the truth. They're lying. I'm truthful. They're liars. But in fact, it turned out to be the opposite. And that's what pissed a lot of people off. Because the first thing anybody thinks of when it comes to Master Universe as a whole, as a franchise, the first 5 characters they really come to mind is She-Ra, He-Man, Sorceress, Skeletor, and Hordak. Those are the 5 main characters. They don't think of anybody else except maybe, Spirit, what's his name? Spirit, and what's his alter ego? Swift Ring, I think. Swift Ring, and Battle Cat Cringer. Nobody else thinks about Master. Nobody else thinks about anything else outside of Master's Universe when it's mentioned, except for those 5 characters and their animal sidekicks of Spirit and Cringer. That's it. They don't think of, Teela, as the main character, and they especially don't think of Teela as a bitter, self-absorbed, homorical, bisexual, LGBTQ bitch. They don't think of that. They don't think of her as being all of that, if not more, which she was presented as in the series. Especially, they don't think of Teela with the look that they gave her. They look at that and they're like, because when the first promotional artwork came out and they saw Teela like that, they're thinking, is that Teela or some kind of Arnold Schwarzenegger stand-in? It surprised them. It shocked them. Because everything that was being leaked out about it, that Kevin Smith was trying to say, oh no, it's all a bunch of lies, was being true. And the only reason, later on, towards the end of the initial season of Revelation, the only reason it got better, like in the final few episodes, is shooting straight with you on this, shoot a straight shoot with you, is, in my opinion, they probably showed the first couple of episodes of the first half of the season and the first couple of episodes of the second half, and the people they showed it to were like, hey, you got to change this up. Even if it was animatics, work in progress animatics, they probably showed it to them and say, hey, you got to fix this. Because there's going to be fans that are not going to be thrilled with this, so you got to fix it somehow. And even though the animation couldn't be fixed, they probably like, okay, let's fix it in voicing. Let's get the people back to re-record different lines so that it gives off a different vibe. That's the only reason it got a little bit of improvement, towards the end. But again, it's one of those examples of a reboot remake that didn't start off or end on the best of terms, because of the fact that Kevin Smith was lying about what pretty much everybody already knew through the leaks. Now, because of that, Kevin Smith apparently has learned his lesson and is trying to keep it tight-lipped about what we're going to get, in the upcoming continuation. And okay, that's good on his part. At least he's realizing, hey, if information gets out about this, it's not, people won't give it a chance. So give him credit there that he's learned his lesson. But still, to come out and basically say that your spiritual successor, your soft reboot remake continuation of the original Filmation series is not what people are hearing about, especially hearing from a source close to the situation, for you to come out and lie and deny that, and then it turns out to be true, it turns your remake that you're trying to, give people an opportunity to watch into that piece of chocolate out of that box that's rotten to the core, and they don't want nothing to do with it. But again, those are just prime examples of people reaching into that box of chocolates, eating it, and it tasting stale at first when it comes to Princesses of Power, and then pulling out another piece and it looks rotten and you want nothing to do with it, as in the case of Revelation. But there are other examples of remakes and reboots out there that that turn out good and stay good. They still have the flavor in them, even if that piece of chocolate's been around for at least a couple of months. A good example of that, Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog, the 252 start of the soft retcon reboot, if you want to look at it that way, which was all due to the fact that behind the scenes, as everybody has pretty much documented by now, Ken Pendis had filed a lawsuit for his characters because, he felt he wasn't getting paid royalties and his characters were being misused in a way that he didn't want them being misused and stuff like that. It's a whole mess. It's a whole jumbo-bumbo mess. So what happened is 252 was basically the beginning of a new era, a new soft rebooted retconned era, which had connections to the original continuity, but in story, even the characters were acknowledging that the old memories were being replaced with new memories from the new continuity, thus fully turning what was a soft reboot retcon into a full-on reboot retcon, even though it stayed within the same continuity, somewhat same storyline, timeline, whatever you want to call it. And, it was just one of those situations to where it was a reboot, a remake that some people were unsure about, but it was like that piece of candy that they reached in to the box of, took a taste of, even though that box of chocolates has been out for months. They picked out that piece of candy, they ate it, and it still had some flavor to it, to where they're like, it's pretty good. And that's exactly what the Archie Sonic soft reboot, retcon, if you will, or reboot, retcon, whatever you want to call it, basically if you want to take the soft word out, was about, from 252 to the end. That's what it was. It was that piece of chocolate in that box that you pulled out, you ate it, and it still had some flavor in it to where you gave it a thumbs up. And that's an example of a remake, reboot being done right, in a sense, even in the most last minute of situations that you didn't expect, because to be honest, that reboot, that retcon in Archie Sonic was never supposed to be, but because of what happened, it ended up becoming a reality, and it actually turned out to be a very good reality in the long run, if you see what I'm saying. But that's not the only example as well. There's various other examples out there, from what I can tell you. Various other examples. A good one, probably one of the most controversial ones in comic books, is DC's New 52 initiative. That basically went over like a fart in church. I mean, they tried, they promoted it hard, but in the end it became a fart in church, to the point that they had to do a whole new event, crossover event, just to fix it and return everything back to the Prime universe, with a few exceptions here and there. Or remnants and a few exceptions here and there from the 52 universe. The animated movies that DC did also followed suit in this, to the point that when you started with Justice League War, that was the beginning of their interpretation of the New 52, to all the way to the end with Justice League Dark Apocalypse. You know, and that's when it concluded. So again, that's an example of, hey, trying something new, but basically it turns on its head and goes, becomes a fart in church. And basically DC trying to make the best of something with their animated portions. And look, the animated versions, people will say, was a lot better than the initial comic book versions. But again, the comic book remake or reboot, I should say, of the DC universe with the New 52 is another prime example of something being that piece of chocolate you pull out and it's rotten to the core. But this time you add in a little bit of maggots in there for exquisiteness, and you have to throw that out. That's a prime example of a reboot, remake, you know, being in that category. And again, there are other versions as well. There are other versions. There is no doubt. My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, is a prime example of a reboot, remake of a franchise that exceeded expectations in the most positive of ways. It exceeded expectations in the most positive of ways that people wanted more. And now it looks like its successor, Generation 5, Make Your Mark, Tell Your Tale, is continuing that on in their own unique way. You know, it's still carrying on the spirits, you know, the spiritualness of the original. It's still somewhat in the same continuity, but it's in the future. It's just, you know, a great example of continuing a remake and doing it and continuing and doing it and continuing, I should say, on the right foot, on the right tracks, if you know what I mean. But yeah, it's just, that's a prime example. There are others out there that are prime examples. I mean, again, just like with the New 52, you know, there are some examples that left best alone, like RoboCop's movie remake. Shouldn't have happened. That's a prime example, if you will, of something that should have been left alone, you know, not remade at all. But then you take a look at the Mortal Kombat movies recently, the new ones, and those are prime examples of taking what was an already established, what already is a very popular established franchise in the Mortal Kombat series, and basically making some movies that are vast improvements on the original theatrical films. And now we're getting the second one that's supposed to be even gorier and bloodier, if you catch my drift. But yeah, overall, there's more out there, if you will. And I was trying to think about what I was going to say there, so I do apologize for the pause there. I do apologize. But there are more out there that are prime examples of what, you know, of being that box of chocolate remakes and reboots that, you know, sometimes you have good pieces in and you have bad pieces in. A recent example as well is Rescue Rangers. You know, a lot of people looked at that. They saw it being like a not a reboot, but a kind of like a soft retcon of the original series, but with a Roger Rabbit-like feel. And, you know, even though a lot of people like myself enjoyed it, there's no doubt about that, there are some that didn't and felt like it was a disgrace. So it's one of those to where it's one of those pieces of chocolate to where you pick it up and you eat it and it's like, you know, it's pretty good, yum 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 yum, right? And you get to the last part, but then that's when that last part has a bit of bitterness in it, and you can't finish it, and you're like, ugh, everything else was good, but ugh, throw it out. And, you know, some people will look at the Rescue Ranger movie being a soft retcon, soft remake, whatever you want to call it, reboot of the series, but with that Roger Rabbit feel, that's kind of like that piece of chocolate that's good all the way till you get almost to the end of it, and then that's when you start feeling tasting the bitterness, the blueness about it, and you have to toss it out. For some, they didn't taste that. They tasted a good piece of candy or a piece of chocolate, you know, like myself. But others, they felt that way. It's like it was good, but towards the end, it was like bleh, you know. But again, a lot of prime examples, folks. A lot of prime examples, more than I can count. But the thing is, when it comes to remakes and reboots, should some be done? Yes. You know, when it comes to certain franchises and everything, yes, they should be done. You know, should they be done with, you know, all the time? No. You know, should every franchise, I should say, get a remake or reboot? No. Some deserve it, some don't. Because when you look at you know, how certain franchises were originally presented, you know, compared to other ones. You know, if you try to remake those certain franchises, fans are going to expect you to try to keep some resemblance of the original in your remake and in your reboot, and sometimes that does work. But then again, you have certain franchises and everything that are presented in a certain way that when you try to remake it, and you try to keep, or you try to plan to keep some resemblance, but you see that maybe it's too complicated for you to do so, and you go off in a different direction, then yeah, that just shows that that franchise is one of those franchises, I should say, that shouldn't have been touched for a remake or a reboot compared to certain other ones. But yeah, should certain franchises be considered for remakes and reboots? Absolutely. Should some be left alone and not be in that consideration? Absolutely. And that's a straight shoot. That's a straight shoot, with you guys on it. On remakes and reboots, basically. That, some should be considered and some shouldn't. Some will work and some won't. It all depends on the presentation. But anyway, though, guys, I just wanted to come on here and give you my straight shoot on remakes and reboots and give you some examples, shooting straight with you on those, which ones, have been in that situation to where people thought they started out good, but then realized they weren't as good as they were, and how some that start off on the wrong foot and ended on the wrong foot, and so on and so forth, and how some had to be rebooted, and although it looked like they may not be good, ended up being good. You catch my drift. You catch my drift, if you will. But anyway, though, guys, let me know what your thoughts are down below. Comment if you like. Live chat during the premiere, if you will. Super thanks will be enabled afterwards. But again, guys, give me your thoughts on how you feel about reboots and remakes. I know this may have sounded a little ramble-ish. Again, this was my third attempt at doing this. Got interrupted twice, basically because my mom's phone wasn't working on her end. I'm assuming it's my second older sister's phone service that's acting up. But anyway, though, guys, I just wanted to come on here, give you my thoughts, shooting straight with you on everything I just mentioned. And again, that's all I really want to say. So till next time, guys, I'm going to get me some lunch so I can get myself more recalibrated, if you will, on doing some more future videos today. Until next time, guys, I'm out.